Have you ever felt an inner voice that questions, criticizes, or pushes you into choices you later regret? Carl Jung called this force in women the animus, the inner man who, if left unconscious, can sabotage growth, relationships, and self-worth. But Jung also taught that this same power, once recognized, can become a source of strength and wisdom. Today, you are invited to uncover this hidden presence and begin the journey from sabotage to self-mastery. Carl Jung described the animus in women as one of the most influential archetypes within the unconscious, and he warned that when it is not understood, it can act as a saboteur. The negative animus does not appear as a stranger, but as an inner voice that seems to belong to the woman herself. It speaks in rigid opinions, in unyielding judgments, and in harsh self-criticism. These are the signs of negative animus in women that Jung observed repeatedly in his work. A woman influenced by this shadow may hear constant doubts about her worth, or feel driven to measure herself against impossible standards. At times, the animus emerges as sudden bursts of anger or uncompromising positions in conversation, as though an invisible authority were speaking through her. Jung taught that this force is not truly her authentic self, but an archetypal energy operating unconsciously. Left unrecognized, it becomes a hostile occupier of her psyche, one that drains vitality and erodes confidence. What makes it so powerful is that it feels natural, as though it is truth itself, when in reality it is the unconscious acting autonomously. Jung insisted that these inner patterns must be studied, not ignored, for silence only strengthens their grip. The animus, when unexamined, dictates the way a woman sees herself, convincing her she is weak, unworthy, or incapable of change. This is the essence of sabotage, not a visible enemy, but an inner figure that shapes perception from within. By recognizing that these voices and rigid opinions are the work of the animus rather than the whole self, the possibility of freedom begins. For Jung, education of the inner life always begins with awareness, and in the case of the animus, awareness is the first step toward transforming sabotage into strength. Carl Jung explained that the animus, when unconscious, does not remain hidden within the private thoughts of a woman. It reveals itself most clearly in her relationships. Jung saw that the animus archetype often becomes projected onto men in her life, shaping attraction, expectation, and conflict. This animus projection in women means that instead of seeing her partner as he truly is, she sees him through the lens of her inner masculine, the unresolved figure within her psyche. At first, this projection can create passion and intensity, but over time it often leads to struggle, disappointment, and imbalance. The animus archetype in relationships shows itself when a woman expects her partner to live up to impossible ideals, or when she becomes locked in cycles of criticism and confrontation. Jung emphasized that this is not deliberate manipulation, but unconscious compulsion. The inner man acts as though it were alive, and the woman may feel as though she is fighting her partner, when in reality she is struggling with her own unintegrated animus. In this way, the animus sabotages intimacy, replacing genuine connection with repeated patterns of projection. Jung taught that projections are attempts of the unconscious to resolve inner conflicts by casting them outward, yet they always fail to bring lasting harmony. When the animus is unrecognized, relationships become battlegrounds where unresolved psychological energies collide. The tragedy is that the true potential of love, to be a mirror for growth, is overshadowed by unconscious forces. Jung urged that the only way to break these cycles is to withdraw the projection, to face the animus as an inner figure rather than a partner's flaw. By doing so, the woman begins to see the other as he truly is, allowing relationships to move from sabotage toward authentic partnership. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious has a way of turning against us when we ignore it, and the animus in women is a striking example of this truth. When the animus is not made conscious, it becomes an inner tyrant, a voice that undermines confidence and poisons creativity. Jung described this as the unconscious animus influence, where the inner man, instead of being a source of guidance, becomes a saboteur. Women under this influence often experience an inner dialogue filled with criticism, impossibly rigid standards, and judgments that feel absolute. It is as though a second personality lives inside, one that insists on domination rather than cooperation. This is why Jung noted that the negative animus does not guide but dictates, replacing a woman's authentic voice with authoritarian opinions that may not even belong to her. Such inner sabotage manifests outwardly as self-doubt, hesitation, or the abandonment of meaningful goals. It can also drive extremes, either silencing her expression altogether or pushing her into rigid assertion. The tragedy, Jung explained, is that she often mistakes these voices for truth, not realizing that they come from an archetype operating unconsciously. This confusion makes the sabotage so powerful, for the animus feels like her own conviction rather than an inherited psychological pattern. Yet Jung also taught that awareness is transformative. By identifying the destructive patterns of the animus, a woman can begin to separate her true self from the unconscious figure that seeks to dominate her. This recognition does not silence the animus immediately, but it removes its illusion of authority. Jung insisted that the unconscious, when brought into awareness, loses its power to sabotage and begins to reveal its hidden energy. In this way, the animus is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a figure to be understood and eventually transformed. Carl Jung never spoke of the animus as purely destructive. He always emphasized its dual nature. What appears first as a hostile force, a critic, or a saboteur can, once integrated, become a profound source of wisdom. Jung explained that the animus represents the inner masculine within a woman, and like all archetypes, its destiny is transformation, not suppression. The task is not to silence the animus, but to bring it into consciousness, so that its energy may be directed toward growth. This is what Jung meant by integrating animus in women's psychology. When faced honestly, the animus begins to shift from an inner tyrant into a counselor, from a destructive critic into a voice of clarity. Jung described individuation as the process by which opposites within the psyche are united, and in the case of women, this often involves balancing the feminine with the masculine energy of the animus. In its positive form, the animus inspires courage, assertiveness, and depth of thought, qualities that enrich rather than undermine her life. Instead of dictating or sabotaging, the integrated animus becomes an ally in decision, making, and creativity. Jung stressed that this integration requires struggle, for the unconscious does not yield easily. A woman must learn to recognize when the animus speaks through rigid opinions or harsh self-criticism, and instead of obeying blindly, she must confront it as a separate figure within her. By engaging with it consciously, through reflection, self-awareness, and psychological work, she begins to transform its energy. The integration does not erase femininity, rather it deepens it, allowing a fuller expression of the self. In this way, the woman is no longer divided within but strengthened by her inner masculine, achieving the balance Jung believed to be essential for individuation and wholeness. Carl Jung taught that what we refuse to face within ourselves will eventually shape our destiny from the shadows. The animus in women is a striking example of this truth. Left unconscious, it becomes the inner man that sabotages confidence, distorts relationships, and silences authenticity. Yet when brought into awareness, the same force transforms into a source of strength, wisdom, and clarity. We have seen how the animus can act as a critic, a tyrant, and a projector of illusions, but we have also seen how it holds the potential to become a guide. Jung reminded us that the path of individuation is not about denial but integration, not about destroying the archetype but transforming it. The task, then, is to confront the animus, to recognize its voice, and to claim authority over one's inner world. Only then does a woman move from sabotage to self-mastery, from unconscious repetition to conscious growth. The invitation is clear: to step into the wholeness that comes when the inner masculine and feminine no longer battle, but work together in harmony. This is the liberation Jung envisioned, the freedom of becoming fully oneself.